Okay, then let us start. See, today we have to talk about separation of power first. Separation of power. Now, I have talked about separation of power a little bit, when we were talking about the constitutional governance, right? And that time also we talked about. But separation of power here we will deal with detail. Now, what is separation of power? You must be knowing that it started during Montesquieu time, right? That one person should not have all the power because that leads to ultimately a sort of a king type structure. So we don't wanted the concentration of power. So we needed sort of the power should devolve. Now that devolution of power, Montesquieu had sort of went into two different branches. One branch is, as you can say, the UK one, right? Whereby they say that okay, separation of power is there, but it is the legislature who holds all the power. It is the legislature who holds all the power, and legislature have given power to judiciary and executive, right? So there is a separation of power, but still it is the legislature which is supreme, right? So it talks about separation of power is something whereby that is the legislature has separated it. Ultimately the legislature used to hold all of them, and then the legislature have separated it, right? So the separation of power is something which the legislature itself gives to the people, right? Second is the US version. US version specifically says that there will be 3 organs and all of them will hold that particular power, right? So they have 3 different articles saying that executive power shall be in the president, judicial power shall be in the Supreme Court, and the legislative power shall be in the Senate, right? So there is a very extreme kind of, very rigid. You see, these are the power given, and it is not given by the parliament, but it is something which is written in the constitution itself, right? So the constitution provides for separation of power. Here, it is the legislature which provides for separation of power, right? So there are 2 very different views. Indian view is somewhere in between. If you think about Indian view, there is only one Indian view, that is that the executive power shall lie with the president. Apart from that, there is no other article, right? So we do not have any specific article providing that judicial power shall lie with the Supreme Court or the legislative power shall lie with the parliament. We have only one identification, that is your executive power shall be vested in the president, right? So we did not even follow this, right? And we did not even follow this, right? So we were somewhere in between. And that has led to multiple jurists questioning that the separation of power in its true sense has not been recognized under our constitution. In fact, in law optional you must have seen there multiple times there have been a question. So separation of power in its absolute rigidity is not provided in our constitution, right? So there have been questions on that. Now, the thing is that which one is correct? Should India have chosen the UK version, okay, give the legislature authority to separate the power, or should we have chosen the US version, that okay, all the power should be vested in 3 organs and clearly mentioned in the constitution itself, right? So we sort of choose in between. Now, what was the reason? So there was a lot of debate in the Constituent Assembly, which I will dictate you, right? One of the debate was Krishmachari. He plainly said that, see, separation of power is not recognized in our constitution. A very extreme view, one of them said. But obviously Ambedkar stood up and replied that no, that is not the case. We have molded separation of power to suit the needs of India. Getting my point? Understood? Like for an example, if you think about it, can you say that in India, executive is totally separate from legislature? No. In fact, the top of the executive is nothing but the legislature, right? So it is not recognized at all, right? Now the question is that in country like India, could we have done something like the US, that okay, they are completely separate? Because if we do that, what will happen? There will be a lot of frictions between these 3 organs, and that might lead to political disability. I mean political sort of not disability, but sort of instability is a correct word yet, instability in the country itself, right? So that is not we wanted, right? So Ambedkar actually argued that no, we have recognized separation of power in principle. In fact, we have a separate provision under the constitution providing that there will be judiciary will be separated from executive, right? Article 51. No, Article 50, yes. 51 is international, yes. Now the question is that if a question comes with regard to whether the separation of power have been clearly recognized, right? So you will start with these two versions and then you will write that how India uniquely placed themselves, right? And then you will go on and point out how the legislature exercises the judicial and executive function, how executive exercises judicial and legislative function, and how judiciary exercises executive and legislative functions, right? And you will cite specific articles with regard to them. Now, this was a question in 2021 also, means, right? Now, I have seen a copy, very interestingly, the student have done that he have cited that thing with the help of a diagram, right? Judiciary, executive and legislature, and here he have written judicial power, executive power and legislative power, right? And for judiciary he have given executive and legislative power, right? So he have very nicely, simply by looking at it, I must tell you, I learn a lot from, checking copies, right? Because multiple people innovate, right? And they come with a unique way of writing, and that is sometimes a very good way of writing, right? They sort of portray it very nicely. Okay, so that is also very, good. He have written a specific article, like for example, judiciary law declared by Supreme Court to be followed all over India, right? That is one of the legislative power he have cited, right? Similarly, Chief Justice will overall regulate the staff of the Supreme Court. That is one of the executive power that he have cited. Similarly, with regard to executive, the judicial power is executive clemency, that he have cited along with the article, right? So very nicely he have diluted, right? That dilution he have very nicely pictured in this particular way, right? So that is also a very correct way of writing, right? Now, what we will do, that we will write the answer to this question itself, do separation of power is recognized in Indian constitution in absolute rigidity? The answer is no. They never ask you question what are the component of separation of power. That has become quite an old school, right? Now that is not needed. Getting my point? Okay, तो लिखिए डालिए इस बात को. समझ में आ गई? Where do we stand? Okay, you could write an answer.